699 days ago, to this exact day, I sat down at a table with some FFA members from Elton High School at leadership camp for Area 3. One of them was this girl named Ryleigh Shuff. I knew who Ryleigh was, but I never really talked to her a whole lot up until this point. Me and her had our first ever conversation. I knew from that moment I talked to her, that day, she was going to be a state officer. I told her to run for it, and first she was like, no, I'm not going to run for it. I'm kind of scared too, this, that, and the other. Dodged around the question. But little did she know, 2 years later, she'd be sitting on the stage fixing to give you her retiring address in front of 1,000 FFA members, advisors, and guests. Ryleigh, your hard work and dedication has shined bright through this past year in service. As a state officer, and to say, I'm proud of you would be an understatement. You absolutely killed it this year, and never forget, you can do absolutely anything you put your mind to. And I can say with confidence, you have gone above and beyond your role as Vice President representing Area 3.
Word is the term Ryleigh used that initiated the beginning of our friendship. As I walked around leadership camp for the first time ever, it seemed as if every 5 seconds, this spastic, loud, and some would even say crazy individual would be screaming, "Word." Before I knew it, everyone was saying it. It had become a trend. I could tell countless stories about Ryleigh and her infamous phrase, but it's time to get to the real stuff. Some would say that sometimes there's no good side to a situation. When I met Ryleigh last year at camp, she taught me that there's always a positive, that there's always a source of light in the darkness. She taught me how to be strong under tough circumstances, how to be calm in a fog of chaos, how to lead instead of follow. Like I previously said, I only met Ryleigh a year ago, but she has made a significant impact on my life. She has been a dear friend through the good and the bad, the pretty and the ugly, and she has made my life as an FFA member and a normal person so much better. I wish I could sit here and tell you all the good things that come with being friends with her, but I'm running out of time. I'm so grateful to be able to call Ryleigh Shuff my inspiration, my motivation, and my best friend.
An ag teacher's greatest joy is to see our students achieve goals that they never thought were possible. I'd like to take you back to the very beginning, when a very unsure freshman came into my room and said the entire creed without breathing once. I really thought she was going to pass out. That following year, she became the P-Law team member who just knew that she would let her team down because she couldn't cut it. Fast forward to last year, she was then the state officer candidate who in her mind would never deserve to wear the jacket because she didn't have the traits needed to be a state officer. Now, joining me back on this stage this morning, she's about to give her retiring address, that same unsure freshman member. And her journey, to me, can teach us three big goals, or three big lessons. The first lesson being that many times we're our biggest critic, that we are all unique, and it is in those differences that make us stronger, and that there is no set traits needed to be a great leader. Ryleigh has made me, her family, her home chapter of Elton, and the state FFA extremely, extremely proud. It is my honor to present to you for the last time your 2023-2024 State Vice President representing Area 3, Ms. Ryleigh Shuff.
I'm shutting the whole block down. Hey, here comes trouble, homie. I'ma tell you how the king like to ride, homeboy.
have ever heard of the movie Forrest Gump? All right, seeing a few hands, it's nice to know that y'all have been able to experience this amazing movie also. So, picture this. 8-year-old Ryleigh just got out of the car from taking a 6-hour trip from Elton, Louisiana to Milton, Florida. And as you can imagine, I was like any other 8-year-old. I hated the long car rides, and I asked if we were there yet about 100 times. Once we arrived at our destination, it was about 9:30 at night. I was tired, and I was ready to do anything but stay in that car any longer. Having me already tucked into bed, my mom put on this movie called Forrest Gump. Now, she did tell me that this movie was going to be more entertaining for her rather than me. And the reason that she did this is because she wanted nothing more than for me to fall asleep. Not even 5 minutes into the movie, my mother was snoozing away, so I laid as still as I could and made no move to wake her. Fighting my sleep, I was trying to understand what this man was doing at a random bus stop and why he liked to talk to everyone that he met. His first memorable conversation being with a sweet lady at that particular bus stop. Forrest had a box of chocolates with him, and he went on to talk about his mama, saying, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." I never really understood this quote until this year. You know how you have the really good, rich and creamy chocolates like milk chocolate with caramel? And then you have the nasty, bittersweet, icky chocolates like dark chocolate orange peel? That's how we're going to differentiate the good chocolates from the bad. My particular box of chocolates started in the month of May last year. I trained all of May in preparation for state office, knowing that nominating committee was going to take place in June. Walking into that first round of personal panel, I was nervous as all get out. Looking at the committee to see if I recognized anyone, I didn't. The only familiar face was Miss Sarah in the back. That whole weekend was an absolute blur, and at the end of it, I realized that I had a lot of fun talking with all the committee members, but I was also very sad because it was over so soon. All of a sudden, Monday night comes, and we all know what that means. The night that we get to hear nom-com results. All of the candidates gathered in the back, and we're swaying back and forth, back and forth. Chicago Bulls comes on, I can't breathe, and then I hear Breck's voice, and I freeze. All I knew is that when I heard names, I needed to clap. So first was Jill, then Alex, and then Emily. And at that point, I was crying, thinking that I didn't make the state officer team. More names are being called out, Cade and Elena. But then I'm really invested in wanting to know who is going to be my area's VP. Once again, I hear Breck's voice, and he's announcing my name. Ryleigh Shuff was being called out. I remember looking at the big screen just to make sure it was me, and then I was off, running to Caden, quickly up the steps, crying so many happy tears, Caden hugging me so tight I thought I was going to pop. It was a dream, an absolute dream. And right in that moment, I knew that that was going to be my first good chocolate out of my box. My whole summer was a fever dream, always on the road or even on a plane. Traveling was definitely a blessing and made my summer worth it. All of a sudden, August creeps up on me, and we all know what that means. School. Now, you'd think I'd be excited knowing it was at my senior year, but all I felt was nerves. My senior year was flying by like everyone said it would, and I remember it being the last week of August. And all of our FFA chapter activities were in full swing. On August 22nd, a Tuesday, my advisor asked all the senior officers to be to school early for a brief meeting. I arrived at school at 7:10 a.m. and needed to be walking in by 7:15. I saw that all the officers were there except for Hayden, so I decided to wait and see if he had any information. Sitting in my car, if you have Snapchat, you know that streaks is something that requires attention at least once a day. So I was sending my lovely streaks and opening up all the random snaps from the night before, and I see Hayden pull up, so I hop out of my car to meet up with him. I remember complaining about how early it was, this and that. I'm a big complainer. But all of a sudden, Hayden stops, turns to me and asks me if I've heard the news. I stopped and I looked at him and I was like, "What news are you talking about?" All he said was, "K-Bud passed away last night." I stopped in shock and couldn't move. I asked him to repeat what he had just said, and he did. And I heard it clear as day. Everything around me flipped upside down. However, we go about our meeting, and I remember trying to walk out to call someone, not knowing who to call. The meeting ends, and I'm off to my history teacher's class, and I was like, I need to call my dad on my phone. He left me alone in the room, and I collapsed and crumbled in the thought of everything that was going on. Crying on the phone, telling my dad what is just happening, all the while listening to my classmates whimper as they walked down the halls. It was a bad nightmare that I thought I wasn't going to escape. We waited a little over a week for the funeral, and that's when it finally stuck with me that this was real. I had no choice but to grow from this horrible situation, continue my year of service, and enjoy my senior year knowing that that's what he would have wanted. The end of August and the beginning of September was my first bitter chocolate. However, just a short week later, I had a trip to visit Winfield. I remember talking with my dad, and I was asking him if I should just make this trip that was a good ways away from home, or should I take time for myself? After talking about it, we came to the conclusion that it would be best for me to get out and have a distraction. So the next day, me and Camille are off to Alyssa's in the trees of Winfield. All the girls stayed the night before at Alyssa's house, and I had the pleasure of having George the cat as my bedmate. Wait. Oh, it's a video, y'all. George is like iconic. It might not play. And might I say, he is quite the cuddly type. We all wake up the next day on this fine morning, get ready for the day, and the next thing that you know, we're off to Winfield Senior High. We arrive to the legendary FFA program. I see all the gadgets that Mr. Ryleigh has. He tells me about all his peel-off secrets, and best of all, we got free t-shirts. Winfield FFA was hosting a car show to help fundraise money for National Convention. And it seemed so cool to me because I've never seen such a fundraiser, but it was also very interesting because I didn't know a lot about cars, so it was definitely going to be a learning experience. All of the state officers were in charge of the bake sale, and boy, oh boy, they had some goodies now. I remember while I was on this trip that all of the parents of the members were asking us what the state officer life was like, and I loved being able to make that connection. However, my favorite part about this whole entire trip is when we got to hand out the plaques to the car show winners. When you handed that individual a plaque, they gave you the biggest hug and the warmest thank you that you've ever heard. The fundraiser ends, and we're all cleaning up the food area, and Mr. and Mrs. Ryleigh are sitting in his home with all those leftover goodies. I thought I was just going to explode with joy. We all hugged and said our goodbyes, and I left Winfield knowing for sure that I wanted to go back. But I also left with a different view on the FFA. I've always known that members and staff are going to care for you regardless of who you are. But to see an entire community come out and support one FFA program gave me so much joy. It's my reminder as to why I wanted to run for state office and why I am always advocating for members around my state. This chocolate out of my box is one of my favorites because it's once again a sense of a reminder that I will forever have such a wonderful support system that will forever be by my side. Louisiana FFA. Everyone's box of chocolates is going to be different. That is a guarantee. But I will say this. no matter how many bittersweet or icky chocolates that you get, no matter how many trials or tribulations that you face, it is always worth it to have that one sweet chocolate. But let's think back to 8-year-old Ryleigh. She could have never imagined how significant this one little quote would be in her life. And she was probably just thinking how those chocolates would taste, literally. And she never thought that her little self, from little old Elton, would be able to make such a genuine impact and make such a connection with one association. But somehow through the FFA, she did. Louisiana FFA, I want to thank you for the best year of service. I genuinely love you all.
Where I wanted to go. Home, where I wanted to go. Home, where I wanted to go. Home, where I wanted to go.
Ryleigh, getting to spend this year with you has been an absolute pleasure. You have made my box of chocolates filled with so many sweet and wonderful chocolates, and I would just like to thank you for that. I will never forget making animal noises with you and always our really weird hugs. And I will never forget being able to talk with you. You brighten every single room you come into, and you're such a warm and fun presence to be around. I want you to know that I love you so much, and even though we're going to different colleges, I hope we can still stay in touch. If I ever need to remember what like a cat or a lizard sounds like, I'll call you. Louisiana FFA, for the final time, your 2023-2024 State Vice President representing Area 3, Ryleigh Shuff.